Okay, here we are in Asia Minor, in modern-day Turkey. We're here at the ancient city of Ephesus, where it's very famous for Paul writing the letter to the Ephesians, and this is the city of which where he was writing that letter to. It's also one of the seven churches in Revelations that John writes to. John knew this area well because he lived here, and when he was living here, the last couple of years of Mary, Jesus' mother's life, was also here where John was taking care of her.
So we've had a little look around Ephesus, and now we're going to focus in on the Celsus Library, which is without a doubt the most photographed spot in ancient Ephesus. The front is stunning, stacked with columns, carved marble and statues. But before we go any deeper, I want us to be aware of two small details that we probably should remember. The first one is that history did not leave it standing like this. This front, or the facade, is a reconstruction. It was built in the 1970s. It was rebuilt and reconstructed from original pieces the archaeologists found on site and spent painstaking hours putting it back together again. The second thing that I want us to remember is this wasn't here when Paul was in Ephesus. For 2 or 3 years, Paul actually lived in Ephesus, and we see this in Acts 18. The city became grander over the next century or so under emperors like Domitian, Trajan, and Hadrian. So what you're admiring belongs to a later boom time period. Now let's jump in at some of the basics. The library was started a little after AD 110 and finished around AD 160. It's likely that the Apostle Paul was there around, well, possibly around 50, 52 AD. So we are talking like 60, 70 years later. It could hold, this library we're talking about, could hold about 12,000 scrolls, which made it the third largest library in the ancient world. It was just behind Alexandria and Pergamon. Picture shelves of papyrus and the quiet of readers and the steady work of copying scrolls from one generation to the next so that they could continue having this knowledge. But this building wasn't just for books, it was also a tomb. A son named Tiberius Julius Aquila Pompeianus built it to honor his father, Tiberius Julius Celsus Pompeianus, who had served as proconsul of Asia. Celsus's decorated marble sarcophagus is in the crypt beneath the building. So this place is a public library as well as being a family memorial at the same time. Up on the top level, there used to be a statue of Celsus in armor standing watch over the House of Books. The statue now lives in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum, but here it once stood in the middle of the upper facade. Look at the 4 women that we see on the screen now. These aren't the original statues, but they show what the originals were meant to show and the values that they gave to, I guess in general, to learning. Their names are Sophia, wisdom; Arete, excellence; Episteme, knowledge; and Inonia, intelligence or thought. Episteme is headless. Even so, the message is clear. A good library isn't only storage for books, it's about growing wise, excellent, knowledgeable, and thoughtful people. If you're wondering about the inside, well, it hasn't been reconstructed, it hasn't been rebuilt yet. Imagine a long hall lined with book niches where scrolls and books would be kept. The builders created a double wall to protect the scrolls from heat and damp. This is a simple but very clever engineering, a piece of engineering to, I guess, give some level of climate control and be able to protect the scrolls long term. It would have been a place to store, to read, to study, and also a place to honour an important leader of the community. But what went wrong? In AD 262, the contents caught on fire and burned up. One of these sad moments when knowledge goes up in smoke, quite literally. In the 10th or 11th century, the front collapsed. Then, after a very long pause, the facade was rebuilt in the 1970s, piece by archaeologists. And to be honest, they've done a pretty good job of putting it back together again, and it is extremely stable. Even the earthquake, the Aegean Sea earthquake on the 20th of October 2020, wasn't able to knock it down. So, yeah, they've done a really good job. Why does this site matter? Because it shows what a community values. The amount of carving and marble tells you this was expensive. It came from a very wealthy family who cared about learning, but probably more importantly, cared about the city that they lived in. Their gift was useful as well as beautiful, a place for ideas and a memorial that outlived them all. For those who have read the book of Acts, notice the timing. The church in Ephesus began before this grand facade existed. Faith took root in the city still under construction. Paul visited Ephesus more than once. He stopped in briefly in Acts chapter 18 and then came back and stayed for about 2 or 3 years around the early AD 50s. We see this in Acts 19 and 20. That's actually a surprisingly long period of time for the Apostle Paul. And it tells you something about this city. It tells us that this city mattered, that this city had a level of importance and influence within the wider region. What did Paul do here? Well, the scriptures tell us that he taught. Day after day, he reasoned with people about Jesus. When the synagogue grew resistant, he moved to a public venue called the Lecture Hall of Tyrannus. Over time, the message spread throughout the province of Asia. So not just this particular city was touched by the work of Paul, but indeed the entire region. And much of that is because of Paul's work, but also just how influential this city was for the region. Ephesus was a spiritual city. Magic, amulets, and spells were part of everyday life. Many new believers publicly burned their scrolls worth a huge amount of money to make a clean break from the old pagan religions and to this new faith in Jesus. We see this again in Acts 19:19. The gospel also touched the economy, not just the worldview of the culture. Ephesus was famous for the temple of Artemis and the trade around it. Silversmiths who sold little Artemis shrines saw business drop, and as such, a riot broke out. The crowd rushed into the great theatre shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." From here, Paul wrote letters. He mentored leaders. People like Aquila and Priscilla taught here. Apollos learned here. Later, Timothy served here. We see this in 1 Timothy 1. And the New Testament letter that is called Ephesians was likely written a few years later while Paul was in prison, somewhere around AD 60 to 62 while he was imprisoned in Rome. Paul later met with the Ephesian elders at nearby Miletus and gave a tearful farewell, saying he had served them night and day for 3 years. It's a snapshot of deep pastoral love for the church, but also for the community that he worked in. So when you look at this library facade built decades after Paul, remember this was an important city with power, with influence, and with great prosperity. There is a reason Paul spent so much time in Ephesus, an unusual amount of time for him. This city mattered, and Paul understood the significance and the influence of this city upon the region that it found itself in. So when you come and have a look around Ephesus, be able to take this into consideration, but also see the grandeur and the beauty of what has been left behind for us to visit and to view. Thanks for watching. And if you liked that video, please press the like button. It really does help our channel. Also, please press the subscribe button because then you get to be kept up to date with all of the new content that comes up onto Dr. Campbell's YouTube channel. Secondly, if you would like more of this kind of content, Dr. Campbell has a bunch of these sorts of books that it's available on Amazon. So looking at this book, this is Synagogue's Heritage, looking at the Tabernacle, Temple, Synagogue, and all the way leading into the church, and also Ecclesia, the Long Journey to Tomorrow. These are books looking at church history. There's also other books, smaller books that are things like Ancient Ephesus and Early Christianity. She has a bunch of these books that you can find on Amazon, so let me encourage you to go over and check out some of her books as well. But thanks for watching the video.